Hello, everybody. Happy Monday, July 8th, 2019. I'm Joey. You might have seen me around these parts before. So, let's talk about this movie. I wasn't even sure if I was going to make a review or a video about this movie. I wasn't really planning on it. And then I found myself just, sort of ruminating and thinking about it a lot. And I keep changing what I thought about it. So I'm like, you know what? Let me go onto stream and just sort of let it all out. Just lay it all out there. Maybe people can bounce their ideas off of me if they have watched the film before, or have watched it or haven't seen it yet. Hello, Jim. Hello, Anna. Um, Anna says, "Hi, Joey. Haven't watched this yet, but I'll stay because I'm not sure if it's for me or not." Well, that's a loaded question with this movie. I know a lot of people. I'm just gonna go sort of out of the gate and say there is a lot of. It can be pretty intense if you're somebody that has a anxiety or sort of sensitive to gore, or just you're just overall sensitive. Um, this movie will get on your skin, and I think it does it well in a lot of ways, and then that's one of the things I really like about it, is that it does kind of just um, it triggered me specifically in a way that I didn't feel totally opposed to. I kind of like that it pulled me in that way, and it sort of set off some anxiety or maybe the panic attack, sort of like Dani character in the movie. She deals with a lot of, she deals with uh, I guess she some sort of anxiety. It's not really explained. She has panic attacks. I believe they say her sister is bipolar in the film. This is going to be a very spoilery review. I should probably preface that before anybody really goes too far and decides or doesn't realize that there's going to be spoilers. This is going to be very spoilery review and discussion. So I'm just going to put that out there now so people know whether they want to keep listening or not. Anna says, "Gore's fine. Just tell me any jump scares." It's not a jump scare movie. If you watched Heredity, which is also by Ari Aster, that had a little bit more jump scares. But what I like about this film, and it's a pretty long movie, but it is a slow burn, and I feel like it is very. There are parts where you feel worn out. You feel like it's sort of drudging on, but honestly, it's not to the fault of the movie, and it does a good job of kind of pulling you through this sort of traumatic situation that all these people are in. But there's gore, but I don't recall any jump scares. There's just sort of things that you don't expect to see, but nothing that's just sort of jumping out at the screen to you, or loud bangs or sort of anything like that. So there's none of that, which I like, because I also agree that it is kind of lazy and cheap, a jump scare. There's times when a jump scare is warranted, and a lot of the times I feel like in more recent horror movies, jump scares are used almost to a comedic effect. It kind of like people like to subvert the jump scare because it is sort of an overused and lazy mechanism. Like where somebody's in a conversation with her, kind of like quietly looking around a room and assessing what's going on, and it's quiet and still, and all of a sudden it's like their dad comes home and he has like groceries, and it like scares the crap out of him. I feel like there's a lot of that now, but this movie doesn't have any of that. This movie is just great at tension. There's a lot. It's from almost the get go. There's just this tension. There's this uncomfortable feeling that washes over you. At least this is my experience with the film. Because right away you feel like you're thrown into the situation where the characters are they're going through some stuff. Everybody seems to be going through some stuff. Everybody's a little, everybody seems to be in their mid 20s. They're doing the 20s thing. They're not sure what their life is going to go. They're questioning everything. They're questioning their relationships. And Ari Aster has definitely come forward, and he's been very open about saying that this is essentially a breakup movie. He got over a break. He was getting over a breakup when he wrote this movie, or he had just broken up when he started writing this movie. And it's very prevalent throughout. Like, it is obviously a breakup movie, but there's a lot of stuff you could take away from it. And some of it, I wonder, Ari Aster is a very good storyteller. He's a very smart guy. So there's some stuff where I'm like, did he intend to, kind of show things from this angle, or did he decide to put it in from here? And there's some stuff that I took away that wasn't really there, because it's hard to be completely objective about stuff like this, especially breakups. Almost everybody's been through a breakup, or 3 or 4, or how many. So everybody's been through. I feel like everybody's sort of been through a situation like this, where they're between Dani and Christian, two of the sort of main characters, where they're kind of just they're going through the motions. Neither one really has. Christian doesn't really have the stones to break up with Dani, and he doesn't really know if he wants to. He's not sort of, he's not sort of totally sold on breaking up with Dani, but he kind of wants to. He seems curious, about what else is out there, and he's kind of aloof. He's not really sort of emotionally tethered to Dani. He cares about her, but he's just like sort of, he's not a great guy. And he's not sort of emotionally involved or supportive of Dani. And Dani's going through a lot when we meet them in this film. She's going through, the death of her parents and her sister in a very traumatic way. And on top of that, she seems to have issues of her own, of sort of anxiety or, depression. It's not very, maybe bipolar disorder like they say her sister has. So she's going through a lot, and it's understandable from a boyfriend perspective. I mean, you want to, if you really love somebody, you want to be there for them and care for them, and you want to be able to help them. But there is it gets to a point where I understand where it could be a lot, but the fact that Christian doesn't even really see his comforting is basically he's just there, and that's where the sort of the threshold for him is. He's just there. He's present physically, but not really mentally. He just never. This dude just never really knows how he's feeling at any moment. G is saying his indecisiveness is a big part of his character. His indecisiveness towards everything. Yeah, this guy just really, you could peg that maybe him being sort of young. I guess they don't really go into how old this guy is, but he just really doesn't know what the hell's going on. It goes into him trying to figure out what his thesis is, and Dani at one point goes like, maybe you could do it on this, knowing that their friend. Sorry, I have the character list. I've been messing with these character names for a while. Josh is also he's been talking about maybe doing his theory on this for a while. He's already working on this before they even decide, or before they even confirm this trip. So Christian is just kind of decides to piggyback on Josh's thesis later on in the film, which is a point of contention. And I actually read a little bit of the script. They don't go into how much of a sort of spat they have in the film. So I'm excited to see if there is going to be an extended version. It's a long film, but I want to see if there's more with that Josh Christian dynamic. I want to see how far that goes, because in the film they have sort of, when they're already in Sweden, they're already having sort of a conversation, or sort of they have a fight about it. But apparently in the script it goes a little bit further, and you really see how much of a jerk Christian is, even more so. I mean, you could kind of get that from the film, but in the script it goes a little bit more so into saying, showing how almost he attacks Josh, and he undermines him in almost every turn. There's a lot more of that. Christian going to this guy for an interview, getting like pictures here. Or getting some more information here, and they're both kind of just trying to do their own thing, and Christian has no intention of collaborating with Josh, which just creates further animosity. And I'd like to see more of that. I would have liked to see more of that sort of him, the backstabby kind of stuff with Christian and Josh. But I digress. That is a sort of it's important, but it's a small part of the movie, and it just kind of tries to drive home the point of Christian is a jerk. This guy, he's a jerk to Dani, and but he sort of there are moments where he's like sort of an outright jerk to Dani, but a lot of it is sort of just like this passive aggression, toxic stuff. Like there's the point when they get there and they're all trying the mushrooms, and he kind of he doesn't console her. She doesn't want to take the mushrooms when they get there, and he's like, oh, it's all right. You don't have to. He makes the minimal effort to like, you don't have to take the mushrooms, and then like sort of pauses and waits for her to change her mind, essentially, so that she's like feels guilty or pressured into taking. He even makes a point of saying, you don't feel pressured by them, but he's the one that's sort of even guilt tripping her further by saying that. He's just like, it's just kind of gross behavior, and they don't make any secret that Christian is not the greatest guy, and that is sort of a theme throughout the thing. He might not be necessarily evil, but he is the toxic boyfriend. He's gross. He undermines Dani. He undermines his friends. He's a very selfish character. So there's a lot of just sort of, I really want to go see a second viewing, because now that this is Monday, I saw it Saturday night, so things are starting to escape me a little bit. But there's a lot of subtlety in a lot of the shots and a lot of the things leading up to the festival, even before they really get into the festival, and you see all the stuff on the walls and all the drawings and art that really tells you the whole story. And I've been reading and listening to interviews with Ari Aster, and he's made it a point to say we're not really trying to hide anything from you. It's literally written on the wall. The story's literally written on the wall. Everything that happens is pretty much you've been shown it already. And even in the beginning, like that, they kind of hold on that frame of that painting for maybe a minute, I think. So what's going to happen. You don't necessarily know who or why, but you kind of, if you really sort of take it in, that how this movie is going to play out with these characters. So getting into sort of a huge part of this film is sort of psychotropics, like drugs that mess with your take on reality, your vision, your sort of they're just messing with your brain, and it gets to a point where what's happening for real. Like all these people all seem to be sort of inebriated through a good amount of the movie, and more so they're just sort of being broken down by all these drugs and all whatever the hell else they're being given by the family. I'll call them the family, but even saying the family in that way makes them sound like a cult, which you could say they are. It's really interesting because I feel like at a certain point you start to wonder what are these characters doing what they're doing because of the suggestion from the family and these drugs leading to them to be more suggestible, or are the drugs just sort of exposing who they are, truly inside? I guess that comes down to your own personal belief or perspective on what those kind of drugs are, or what is actually happening in the film. But I think it might be a little bit of both, especially we'll jump forward a little bit, and this is a point where I've sort of I've discussed this with Gio, who's watching, and Sean, and I haven't discussed it with Sean and Jim about the Christian scene and him sort of being immediately sort of he's interested in Maya, but she's a young kid. I think they say, I don't know if they say it in the film or not, how old she is, but I believe she's 16, so she's a kid. But you know, at first you're kind of wondering, is this guy just being a creep? Is he being a weirdo? Is he like actually like interested, or is he like just curious and you know he's just sort of absorbing all these weird notes that are happening throughout the movie. Or during his first few days there, there's this sort of almost I want to say sickly looking like young girl that just keeps eyeballing him, and he's sort of just he kind of looks at her like what's the deal. So there's you could go from that angle, I think, or you know he wants to you know start doing it with people besides Dani, and you could see him as being like sort of just looking at her like a piece of meat almost. But again, this goes back to was that his true sort of feeling? Was that his true feeling, or was the suggestion starting right away? Was he being coerced and manipulated to feel that way towards Maya? It felt there's a point where I personally felt like he was being conditioned, being sort of conditioned to you know do what he did. And I don't really want to go into details because it's his YouTube, but I think he was conditioned to you know get with Maya. You know they needed his DNA. And this kind of there's a weird thing that sort of there's a lot of parallels to Hereditary as well, but they said he was a viable you know match to procreate with Maya. They chose him, and there's a lot that I'm trying to figure out how far back was this all set up by Pelle and sort of the I guess the elders of the group. Was he always intended to go out, you know, to the U.S. or wherever to get sort of people to get a good, you know, the May Queen to get a good sort of a viable mate or viable reproductive partner for somebody in the family, and then you know you have your sacrifices in Josh and Mark, I believe. So there's a part of me that thinks maybe a lot of what happened was just grand conspiracy, and this had been planned from the beginning, including the, I guess in that terms would be murder of, you know, framed murder, suicide of Dani's parents and sister. Gia says, so in the beginning of the movie, Mark says you could be getting that girl pregnant, and Pele says, don't forget all the Swedish girls you'll be getting pregnant. Yeah, I mean, there's also that, which is, I feel like, again, this is not to be funny, but that was sort of a cheeky kind of gross, you know, way to say all. Mark was kind of a gross character. He just kind of didn't give a shit. He didn't really respect it. He was kind of just there because his friends wanted to go. Josh was absolutely interested in going. Christian was interested in going from an academic standpoint. Which he didn't even tell Dani about, but that's a whole different thing. That just goes back into him being sort of a poisonous person. But so Mark was sort of the oddball out. He was just going to hang out and you know get plastered and maybe, you know, have sex with one of these Swedish girls. But obviously, you know, he was sort of heading towards that. Possibly, but then he pissed on the family tree and got, you know, his face taken off and, you know, used as a mask. So Mark was really the only one that didn't totally, wasn't totally there of complete curiosity. He kind of just wanted to go party, which, you know, he was, again, the jester. Gia's saying, are you saying that Pele kills Dani's family? I've come since seeing it, I've come around to think that there was more of a grand conspiracy. He was Pele was sent on a mission to the U.S. and to find the right people, and obviously he found the perfect people to come to the festival. I think there are a lot. I think it was a lot more strategic than maybe it seemed. Pele seemed like, this innocent guy, but I think there is a sort of level of self. There's a level of selfishness and sort of, I don't know. It's there's something a little bit more sinister about the intention of Pele. I think, I don't think his motives were just to like bring them on this trip and to have a wonderful family. He seemed to want to get with Dani, and something that sort of makes me think that is because of his brother. Um, what was his name? I don't remember the brother's name. I can't seem to find it on the cast list. What was his name? What the heck? What the heck was the brother's name? I can't find it. Anyway, the reason that I started thinking it was super sinister, Ingmar. Yes, thank you, G. Ingmar. There's that scene when they're first coming in, and he goes to his friends that he brought, the British girl and the guy, and he said something about a date, and she was like, "What? That wasn't a date." That's weird. I didn't think it was a date. It was just a single day, and the guy seemed very taken aback and a little upset by it. So I feel like there's just this, they. I don't know if Ingmar and Pele really have the same sort of ideology. I don't know if they're totally sort of they run on the same, I don't know, frequency, but it seems like there are definitely some issues with all these people in this family, and even though they're in the family, it's not total. They're not totally. I don't know. It's not totally unified. I think the family is flawed, and that whole dynamic is flawed. But Sean is saying, how did Sis duct tape a tube to her own head? Yeah, I think it's a little aggressive. I mean, it's kind of. It might be it's not really genius. It's kind of, it was a messy kind of murder scene, but there wasn't any necessarily marks or anything, but yeah. Jim is asking, what is he drawing when she shows up and tells the guy she's going? Gia says the table. Yeah, the table. Dani was, always meant to be the May Queen. I think he sought her out almost immediately, and everybody else just sort of was attached. And he kept saying, "I'm so glad you're coming. I'm so glad I'm more excited for you to be coming." And I think it was Pele's intention to always grab her. Again, we're seeing these people we're seeing Dani and Christian right at the end of this relationship. We're literally seeing the end of their relationship. But I just think there's these little microaggressions that happen throughout the movie that make me think there is something a little bit more sinister with these people and who they choose to bring with them. I think there's a bit of a grander design to the whole thing. Gia says, I think it could be interpreted as foul play or as the murder-suicide. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's really any, there was no pushback on this. This was, murder. This was anything but murder-suicide by the sister. So it really bothers me, because I didn't really come to that conclusion until the end. I'm like, you know what, that was weird what Ingmar said to his two friends, and the whole thing with the date. It seemed like he was out, he was ready to, that was sort of the second she got with the other guy. He was a little sort of angry that this other guy was there, but he's very pleasant, he's very calm, he's just they're both very understanding, and and Pele was the same way. No matter, he obviously had a thing for Dani. He even kisses her during when she's crowned. Very, very he grabs her face, and so he's just happy that she made it, and that's the only one he really wanted there, because he wanted Dani and needed to get rid of everybody else. During the festival, and that was the best way he could get rid of Christian. Christian was not the best guy, but he kind of just kept pushing. He kept pushing Dani. He was kind of just, making her realize how terrible he was. But again, I think it was sort of he was another toxic guy, and kind of just telling her, he was kind of twisting her his way also, I think. So I think Pele is maybe just as bad, if not worse, than Christian. I'm just going to go out and say that. Gia says, so here's the thing. I think Pele may have brought her even if the suicide hadn't happened. He would have tried, but I think having her grieve was having her really like kind of broken. It was even more. She needed to have that. I think she needed to have that family. She needed to need a reason to have that attachment. She literally had nobody, I guess, at that point. Her boyfriend wasn't like very comforting, or do you feel held, that kind of thing. So he needed to like kind of just break her of everything to really have her embrace, I think, this family. She needed to have nothing to go back to, basically, I think. Which is like, I don't know. I'm sure there's more of a family. There's more family and friends. Maybe. I mean, she has her friend on the phone who we only hear in the beginning. We don't really hear anything about her. So she must have other people, in the States that are friends. Her friends seem very concerned and very sort of anti-Christian, which is a funny phrase. But it's just interesting. She must have had other people. Sean says something about Ingmar and the whole London couple. We were trying to figure out why the guy from London, Simon, got the blood eagle. I'm thinking because he was trying to stop the elders from jumping. That's the only thing I could really think. He was really disturbing that ceremony of the elders, offing themselves and jumping off the cliff. He was screaming at them to stop. He was being outrageous. He was kind of ruining that sacred ritual to them, and that's the only reason why I could think maybe why he got the blood eagle. But if it was, if that wasn't it, then I really am at a loss for what actually happened or why. Gia says, I'm digging this new perspective on Pele taking advantage of broken or breaking person. Pele was just very clever about it. He knew exactly what to say. This dude is he's very strategic, and I think he had been sizing her up. I mean, I'm sure he was sizing her up even before the movie starts, but that conversation he has with her when they're in Christian's apartment, and everybody else pretty much leaves. Everybody else leaves, and it's just them. Because he knows, nobody else likes her very much, or they're all jerks. And he was like the one guy that she could trust and talk to out of. So it's very smart. And I really, I'm very cynical of this Pele guy, and I'm wondering if it's intentional. If Ari Aster might have felt like there were other people impeding or intruding or manipulating or coercing this relationship, because it feels like Dani, at least to me, doesn't come to this conclusion of getting rid of Christian on her own. It feels like she is manipulated to do so. She hadn't. I don't know. It all just feels very gross to me. Just thinking back about all the things that happened to her. Everybody seems to be manipulating this poor girl to the point where she is completely destroyed. And just to like sort of further it, she's gonna see Christian sort of doing it with Maya. Maya's in pain. Christian is, he's not even cognizant of what's happening in this situation, because they have him so coerced and high on drugs that he's, he's being taken advantage of, Sean says, but Simon took Ingmar's girl. He killed them both, and heartbroken volunteered to be burned in the temple. Yeah, I think that's why he sort of let himself go, because he was sort of like, this was a girl I thought we had a thing, and she likes this other sort of doofus guy. He didn't really get it, and he was also kind of just, yeah, heartbroken. I didn't even think of that, but I think he was kind of a little bit taken aback, and if he had a real thing, but then that becomes interesting too. If he was heartbroken, because they have this whole thing of dealing with pain in this family. So if if he was heartbroken by this, why didn't he go to this family that is supposed to be so great and help you to deal with this heartbreak? Why did he just sort of take it in stride and get let himself be sacrificed? So that's a little bit, it's interesting. It's like if that's the case, if he was heartbroken, then why didn't he confide in the family that's supposed to be this fantastic, helpful, like sort of loving, nourishing family? Why didn't he go to them? Why didn't he help? Unless he did, but we didn't see that on screen, so I'm assuming he kind of kept that heartbreak to himself, which makes it even like, are these people really, are they really smoking the opium? Gia says, well, so I think his name being Christian and him being the final sacrifice is a huge nod to the Wicker Man. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It seemed to be, a pretty big influence. It's hard to do both, do this without sort of acknowledging that, I guess. Gia says, have Pele and Ingmar both been poisoned by the outside world? Yeah, there's just like this jealousy. There's this jealousy, and there's this sort of disappointment that they brought back with them. Now, I think Pele is, I maybe you could say more successful than Ingmar was. Ingmar obviously didn't get the girl, and the girl was punished, and he sacrificed himself. Jim saying his parents sacrificed themselves in a previous ritual. Sean says he did go to them. They were offered him the perfect way out. We killed them in the ritual and spare your pain. Okay, yeah, all right. So see, this is where I'm sort of missing. I'm starting to forget a little bit. His name being Christian is no coincidence. Yeah, I think the name thing is pretty on the nose. I think the real festival is also sort of the festival of John the Baptist, so that kind of plays into that as well. Gia says, oh yeah, there's a thing where Pele's saying his parents were burned alive. Yeah, Pele says his parents were burnt alive. But then it's like, if this festival only happens every 90 years, like I don't, like, the timeline gets a little weird. It's like, did this place during another, like a previous festival where it's like a sort of a watered down version of this big one that we see in the movie? Because if it's happening every 90 years, then I don't know. So going back to the point where the sort of the outside world spoiled them, I think that's interesting. I think they kind of harbor all the stuff that maybe they didn't bring in with them. They didn't really recognize, or maybe they don't even recognize, that what they're doing is manipulation. Unless Pele did set up, the murder-suicide of Dani's parents and sister, maybe they're not cognizant of what they're doing is just as bad as what Christian is doing. If they are manipulating, they might just not recognize that's what it is. I don't know. It's difficult. It's hard to say without really more context, but you kind of want to be cynical, because it's like there's Christian who's very cognizant that he is not being fair to Dani. I think he's aware that he's not being good, and he's very doubtful. And then you have Pele, who sort of is just there, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. And I guess that goes back into what the family thinks. They think they're doing the right thing. And it's just, again, then it's a question of intent. Is it is being cognizant of you doing the bad thing better than doing the bad thing and not being aware that you're being kind of crappy to somebody? There's a whole sort of new series of questions that come up when you start really sort of psychoanalyzing these people. and family. You see I guess two family dynamics. I mean, the family of friends, and then have this cult like family, and then you start noticing a lot of the differences and similarities between them. Um, it's like, is a family that is kind of obviously very outrightly sort of shitty to each other, and very sort of open about it. More, is it better that way, or is it better if everybody is seemingly nice and helpful, but is kind of not agreeable, like sort of behind closed doors? Like, that kind of goes into that thing too. And it's funny because it's in daylight, and it's about dealing with trauma, and there's just it works on so many different levels, and I think that's what makes this movie really great. And I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I've definitely come to like it even more, thinking about it more. I think it's great, and it's also not. I haven't even touched on this, but it's a very funny movie too. There's a lot of very very I mean, in the theater, people were laughing out loud, including myself. There's a lot of great comedic beats in this film, and it does a good job of sort of diminishing a lot of the more tense, serious psychological trauma, mental illness, horror aspects of the film. Jay says they probably do a yearly Midsommar, but maybe it's that several things lined up for this particular one. Yeah, I think maybe the ones they do, between the 90 years are probably a little bit less severe than this one. Like, I wonder if they do all the sacrifices in sort of the off season. They might do the elder things because there are people obviously getting old all the time, but they might not go as crazy with the sacrifices, and this might be the 90-year thing. They do these big sort of over the top sacrifices so the gods will protect them and be give them a good harvest for the next 90 years. So maybe these big gestures of sacrifice are only done in the 90 years. That's why I don't again, there's a lot of rules that we don't know. Maybe there is stuff written on the walls, like Ari Aster said, that you sort of maybe gives more context, and maybe it'll require a second viewing, or you have to wait till it comes on streaming or Blu-ray to really get a good look. And maybe as things come out about the film, it'll be interesting. G says, yeah, because they def have a yearly May Queen, because we see those pictures. That's right. They have the newer sort of color pictures. And actually, I believe they bring that up in the film. He's like, oh, but those pictures are in color. So maybe I'm misremembering, but I believe they had pictures in color, which wouldn't totally make sense, unless they had color photo in Sweden earlier, but I don't think they did. But yeah, fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, I'd go check it out. It's in theaters now. This is not paid promotion. I just I like this one a lot more than Hereditary. Ari Aster's. I just like. I've been listening to tons of interviews with him. I just like him as a storyteller and creative. He's very seems very natural to him, and he seems very humble, and he's still very much in love with the process. And I think he said this might be his last horror movie for a while. He wants to kind of go into more dramatic, dark dramatic thriller, I believe, which I think you could say Midsommar is. I mean, it's not outright terrifying. It is a little disturbing, but it is, it definitely is. It definitely brings you in, and you're kind of in that sort of headspace through a lot of the movie, which is fantastic. Gia says, so the image over Dani's bed was the May Queen and attendants, and over Christian's bed is impregnation with the attendants. Huh. So yeah, see, that stuff like that makes me think they were sizing them up right away. Like, and everybody knew who these people were gonna be and who they who they wanted them to be. It's everybody else knew but them. Gia says it's more atmospheric, but has a lot of classic horror tropes. Absolutely, he definitely pays homage, but yeah, if it was definitely more of an atmospheric kind of anxiety-inducing film, and which is my favorite. That's like my bread and butter. I'm not a big horror person, but stuff like this is I absolutely love it. And we could probably talk about this forever, but we're already going on 40 minutes. I started the stream sort of 10 minutes, so we're at about 40. So this has been fun. I want to discuss more. If we could do a part 2 if we want. But there's a lot. I wonder how much is intentional. I believe a lot of it is. I think Ari Aster is very smart, and a lot of the sort of manipulation side. It's a good sort of a sky, like a bird's eye view of how a relationship ends, and a bird's eye view of a relationship ending, and you seeing all these little mechanisms in place. Maybe there's this guy that's interested in the girl, and he's kind of pushing her a certain way, and he has his friends that are pushing him a certain way, and they're sort of being pulled apart. They're not really dealing with it themselves, or they're just being suggested. There's all this suggestion outside of this bubble, and then there's also other circumstances at play, like the death of a loved one, and just being sort of, I don't know, there's a lot at play. It does a good job of really zooming in and showing you the Dani Christian dynamic, and then it bird's eye view, and you get to see all these other players that come into play in sort of a relationship, and there's all these. There's more than it makes it seem like there's more than two pieces to this relationship. There's just all these other elements, which I think is also fantastic storytelling. So it is a great breakup movie. And in a lot of breakup movies, you see elements of other people interfering or trying to sway person one way or another, and it's sometimes it's shown to be for the benefit of the person. They're trying to help them understand themselves and what they want and what they're doing, and other people are just kind of suggesting to them what they should be doing or how they are feeling. So there's a lot of that going on, which I think was very interesting, and I think it's done well, and it's done almost sort of. It's not done passively, but there's a subtlety to it that a lot of people don't really always pick up on, and maybe now watching this movie, people will recognize it among their family and friends. They'll see what these people are doing. It's a very good at kind of holding up a mirror or a magnifying glass and helping people kind of realize. Yeah, I mean, I've been reading stories of people coming out with their significant others, and some people are like, yeah, like I've been through this kind of situation. Some people are looking at their significant other kind of in a more cynical way, which be what it will. And then there's others that are discussing this movie openly, and it's it seems to be it might have a lot of good and negative effects, but I think that's what makes it kind of a fantastic movie. So I've come around. I've come around in more of a set in stone feeling about the movie, and I think it's really fantastic, and I can't wait to see what this guy does next. Thank you guys for watching. We could talk about this forever, but I'm gonna go and relax and possibly think about the movie a little bit more. But if we want to do another video in the future, we could do that. I'd like to have more of a roundtable discussion on stuff. Maybe Gia could come on, and Sean and Casey and Jim, if they want. We could do a video all together. But thank you guys for watching. I will see you very soon. Thank you guys for tuning in, and catch you later.